let's go on to arrays. Arrays are an ordered list of something, or anything. So here I have days of the week, and I have them in order here. So that's a big key about arrays, is there's order to an array, right? This is the first thing, this is the second thing, this is the third thing, right? Whereas objects have no order. Despite the fact that like I declared these in some order, inside of that object, they're not stored in that order, right? So once it's declared in that order, I can't get them back out in that order. There's no guarantee of order at all with an object. Whereas with arrays, it's very ordered. So I can be guaranteed that if this is the first thing here, this is the first thing I'm going to get out of it as well. So if I look down here, when I console.log that, I get this array back that looks like that. Arrays start at 0. Okay, so when I say days of the week 0, this is index 0 is the first element in the array. I know that's a little weird, but programmers always start at 0. If you remember when I was doing my for loop, I said for or let I equals 0. Just in general, everyone starts at 0, and that's just the way it is, and get used to it. There's like one programming language that starts at 1, and everyone makes fun of it. So anyway, just get used to that the 0 index is the first thing, which makes index 1, as you can see here, index 1 is the second element in the array. So if I ask for index 1, I'm getting Tuesday. This actually makes a lot of the math easier, so in the end you'll end up being grateful for this, but just be aware that indexes start at 0. Okay, so index 6 is the last element in the array. It's the 7th thing, so that would be Sunday. Questions? Okay. So this is how you access something in the array. Use these square brackets, and you put a number in there. That's just how it works. So that's what those square brackets are for. Anything between square brackets, you'll notice that we declare these using square brackets. Those are going to be arrays. Notice they don't have a key. They actually are getting a key. The key for this one, it's implied by the order. So I gave this as the first thing, so its key is actually 0. This one gets 1, this one gets 2. But I don't actually have to declare those things. They just get put there depending on what order I put them in. So it's implicit. So arrays have a bunch of additional pieces of information. They have a bunch of functions of those built-ins, right, that we were talking about before. They have a bunch of them. So for example, I can ask how many are there? So I can say prime numbers.length, and I get 8. There are 8 things in this array. So that means it goes from 0 to 7, because 7 would be the last thing of length 8. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's what length will give you. It's a property. So no, this is not a function, right? This is a property. There's no parentheses at the end. It's not calling a function. It's just a property that's set on it. It's called length. Now there is a function called join. If you want to take an entire array and you want to make one string out of it, you can call join. And what join does, you give it some sort of, what are they called? Delimiter is what it's technically called. But it's whatever I'm going to put between each element in the array. So I gave it this space, or pipe space, right? So you can see here, between each one of these, there's a space, pipe, space. I could have easily put like, I don't know, asterisks between it. Huh, I didn't know my font did that. That's my font that makes it like the cute little wreath-looking thing. That's adorable. But you can put whatever you want in here. If I was super vain, I could put my name or something like that. Right, that's how it joins them together. I'm not vain though, right? Nope, not at all. Okay, questions? Okay. So what happens if I want to add an element to an array? So I've created this an array and I want to start putting things into it. There's a thing called push. And what push does is it puts another element on the end of the array. So I have these courses right here, right? A bunch of courses that are on front-end masters. And then what I'll do is I'll do courses dot push, and then I'll push another one on. So I give it another object to put on there. And then if I look down here, you'll see that Sean Larkin's course is on the end here. And that's the one I pushed on here. So that's what push does. It just shoves another one on the end. You might ask, what happens if I want to put it on the front? There's a function, I'm not kidding, unshift, I think it is. It is literally the worst name for that. Why is it called unshift? Well, if you want to remove something from the front of the array, it's called shift. And I'm sure that they were in a room somewhere, it's like, well, what's the opposite of shifting? Unshifting. And so they called it that. Anyway, you never use it. But just so you know, it's out there. You use push quite a bit, because it's just putting something on the end. Okay? What happens if I want to overwrite something? So like on here I have like my course here, Complete Intro to React. I'm about to come back and do V4 of it. So what I can do here is I can reference courses to equals, right? So is assigned, if you remember, that's what we said that that's going to be. And so if I look down here, you can see it's overwritten that one. And yeah, by setting that to be something else. Make sense? I actually could have even gone in here and done this. So rather than assigning that, I could have said course 2, and then I could have said dot course, and then just changed that part. So the only thing I changed, because the teacher name didn't change, I have not changed my name since last time I was here, as far as I know. And so now I can just say course 2 dot course equals this. And if you go down here and look, sure enough, just the course name has changed. Does that make sense? Cool. Because course 2 is an object, right? Maybe it would make more sense of like Brian's course. Courses 2. And then done Brian's course. Sometimes, like if that helps you to like separate it into 2 lines, like to pull it out in 1 line, and then the second line to modify it, go right ahead. Make your code as readable as possible for yourself. You can see down here it still works the same way. So we talked about push. We talked about overriding. Oh, that's a good one. So yeah, if you override something, it'll throw away what was there before and it'll replace it with something else. So what happens if I wanted to go through and individually log something in the array? Well, I've actually already given you all the tools to do this. We can use a for loop to do it. So if we go right here and I say for, let I equal 0, I is less than cities.length, right? Because cities.length in this particular case is 5, right? That means the last element in the array is index 4, right? So it's because it's always length minus 1 is the last element in the array. So don't go past cities.length, I++, and I can do console.log cities of I, right? Because that's going to change every single iteration of the array. So it's going to do it on index 0, then index 1, then index 2, 3, 4, and then it's going to finish. So that's how you get down here the first ones. Seattle, San Francisco, Salt Lake, Amsterdam, and Hong Kong. Any questions about method 1 here? I'm trying to decide if people are asleep or if this is just being perfectly explained.
I just don't. I guess I don't understand why fully, or what, how you utilize that. Are you just saying to pull one of those items out of the list, or to add?
Why are we doing this?
Yeah, that part. Method 1 versus method 2. Maybe I just missed it.
Yeah, ignore method 2 for the moment.
Okay.
So const city equals cities I. So this is one individual city right now. I'm doing console.log city. Let's say like city to uppercase. First, there you go, and you can see the difference. So this little bit right here pulls out, for one iteration, one loop, right? It pulls out the city that's at that particular index, right? So for a city of 0, it pulls out Seattle, right? So now city is Seattle, and it console logs city or Seattle to uppercase, so that's why you get Seattle right here. That loop finishes. This gets I++, right? So now it's index 1, right? We go back again, cities of I, this is going to be cities of 1, right? So it pulls out San Francisco. Then it's going to do console.log San Francisco to uppercase, and that's how we get San Francisco down here.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
Cool. So that's that. You can shortcut that by just saying cities of I right here. Cities of I, and then we can cut this out right here. It's just a little bit more compressed.
Okay.
But if you find it more readable to do it the other way, please do. Okay, so that is using a for loop. This is something that we've used before. We're used to seeing I and for loops and things like that. Let's talk about method 2. Method 2 is a thing called for each. This is a function that's built into arrays, right? So every array has a method on it. Let's talk about the word method for just a second. I probably have been using that before. A function is just a function. We've talked about that. A method is a function on an object. Or you can also just use method to mean pretty much function. Technically, it's a function on an object, but I hear people use the word method just all the time. So more or less when I say the word method, just assume that I mean function. There's also like procedure. There's a bunch of words for functions. Most of the time people say either function or method. It varies language by language. There's some languages that use the word like method more. Does that make sense? Okay. Sometimes like it's just that vocabulary that sometimes I just have a hard time unraveling. Okay, so for each is technically a method. It's a function, okay? And it's a function that you give another function to, right? So this is what we would call an anonymous function. And this function is going to be run once on every item in the array, right? So this method, in fact, let's just do this. If I do let number of times ran, right now it's been done 0 times, and I'm going to do number of times ran plus plus. So every time this function gets run, this is going to get incremented. So if I come down here at the bottom and I say console.log number of times ran, what's that number going to be? How many items are in the array? 5. So down here, 5, right? So this function gets run 5 times, 1 time for each item in the array. And then down here I'm saying console.log city. City is being injected as a parameter from cities. And that's what for each does for you. That's the point of for each. So that's why you're able to see Seattle, San Francisco. Let's just make this, to make it even more clear, 2 lowercase. And you can see here, these are the ones being logged out by for each. This is 2 different ways to accomplish the same goal. And this is what for each does for you. Questions about for each?
Is there a preferred method when you're programming to use the for each or the loop?
It depends on who you ask, for sure. It's definitely a matter of preference. I use for each constantly and use for loops far less. This is a personal preference. This is more towards what they call functional programming, which I'm a big fan of, and there are other people that don't like it quite as much. If you ask, like, for example, a hardcore Java developer, probably far less a fan of functional programming. But if you ask someone that's like a Haskell programmer or something like that, they would laugh at you for using a for loop because they're a jerk. So do what works for you. If one of these methods feels better or looks better to you, then absolutely do that one. In fact, I'm curious, who prefers method 1? Just like raise a hands here in the room. And who here prefers method 2? So actually what you can do, there's a phantom other parameter here that it's also injecting and I heretofore been ignoring. And this index, if I just did index, comma space, you can see here it actually is injecting the index as well. This is like the tip of an iceberg of functional programming. There's another Kyle Simpson course called Functional Programming Lite. There's also Brian Lonsdorf's course, which is on both phenomenal courses on front-end masters. Brian Lonsdorf also has a book, so does Kyle. They're all really good ways of getting into functional programming. It's more stuff like this, like method 2 up here. I will say that I've never taught this to developers on the first time that they're learning to program. And it's because I used to be scared of functional programming. And at some point I realized like this is actually a really good way for people to get into it and to get exposed to it early, because it took me probably 5 years into my career before I started doing programming like this. And my code is much better now, I think.
That's why I'd actually recommend Bianca's Fundamentals to Functional JavaScript course, because
okay.
it kind of
She has
tries
it too, I
to
forgot
cover
about
that
it.
bridge between the basics of JavaScript to starting to use functional methods.
Totally. So yeah, definitely check out Bianca's course. I definitely endorse Bianca as a teacher in general. A lot of my teaching style is based on hers. So I'd like to say I borrowed it, but I definitely just stole it. She's phenomenal. Questions about this? I don't really test you on this. There's a lot more like deeper rabbit hole to go down here. I just wanted to like expose it to you early. So the journey will feel impossible sometimes. So if this feels hard, it's because it is. That's okay. But Jerome's a really awesome guy. That is objects and arrays.